Hello, my name is Professor Joe Ilk from Defense Acquisition University, DAU, and we're going to talk about Facilities Capital Cost of Money module. Let's take a look at the computer screen and see what the FAR says about FCCM, Facilities Capital Cost of Money. If you notice, FAR 31.205-20 talks about the fact that interest is an unallowable item. Why is interest unallowable for contractors? Well, a contractor could get a contract, go to the bank, utilizing the contract as a basis, borrow the money, take the money that he borrowed from the bank, and spend some or none of the money on the contract, and the government would not receive any benefit for that borrowing or for that interest amount, and then charge the entire interest amount to the contract. And of course, the government would not receive any benefit from that. However, we definitely want the contractors to invest in facilities, equipment, and buildings, things of that nature. So we have something called FCCM, Facilities Capital Cost of Money. If you notice, FAR 31.205-10 on the cost of money is an imputed cost, not a form of interest or borrowing. It's an incurred cost for cost reimbursement type contracts. It is a cost of money is allowable if it's measurable, assignable, and allocable to contracts. And the actual interest cost that a contractor does when they borrow money from a bank is not allowable to a contract under the cost accounting standards. Let's take a look at part of FCCM. As I mentioned earlier, it's an imputed cost related to the cost of the contractor's capital committed to facilities. The cost accounting standards 414, cost of money, provides detailed guidance on calculating FCCM. And we're going to do an exercise here in the next few minutes. It's determined whether that cost of capital from the contractor is from the owner's capital or from whether it's borrowed or not. It is not a form of interest in FCCM. FCCM is an imputed cost. The purpose of FCCM is to improve the contractor cost measurement by providing for an allocation of cost of contractor investment in facilities, negotiated contracts. This is to ensure a uniform consideration. We use the Treasury rate. And you can use that, you can get that Treasury rate from your policy shop in your contracting department. Now let's go through an exercise in doing and completing FCCM. We now have part of Smith Corporation. Smith Corporation submits a cost proposal in which you're supposed to calculate facilities capital cost of money. The Treasury rate is 6%. The contractor has estimated and the government has accepted the following distribution of facilities capital investment, 20%, 40%, and 40%. Now, when a contractor develops their facility capital cost of money factors, it's not uncommon to have Defense Contract Audit Agency, known as DCAA, to go into a contractor's facility, look at the books, and go through the processes the contractor developed to determine FCCM, and then to write a report saying, yes, DCAA agrees with the process and procedures and the dollar amounts the contractor determined, or no, it doesn't, and there's some type of negotiation between the government and the contractor as to what those rates would be. Now back to the problem. We have here in Table 1 a list of the cost elements. Direct material at $300,000. Notice we have direct manufacturing labor using 15,000 hours at $18.45 an hour for a total amount of $276,750. Then look at manufacturing overhead. We have manufacturing overhead as a relationship to direct manufacturing labor dollars. That relationship is 160% of direct manufacturing labor dollars. So if you took 160%, that's 160 divided by 100, times the 276,750, which is direct manufacturing labor, you would get the amount of 442,800. Obviously, as direct manufacturing labor increases, the manufacturing overhead cost increases. And as the manufacturing labor decreases, the manufacturing overhead cost decreases. We have an ODC, other direct cost, of $50,000. And when we add up these four cost elements, we get total manufacturing cost of $1,069,550. The last element we have is G&A expense, general and administrative expense. Those are the corporate expenses. Notice again, there's a relationship in this example between G&A and total manufacturing cost. This relationship is 22% of total manufacturing cost. So if we took 22 divided by 100 times the $1,069,550, we would get $235,301. Obviously, in this relationship, as total manufacturing cost increases, the G&A expense increases, and as total manufacturing cost decreases, G&A expense decreases. We add the total manufacturing cost and the G&A expense to get a total cost of $1,304,851. Now let's take a look at Table 2. Table 2 shows, in terms of our two pools, manufacturing overhead and G&A. The base for those pools, as we just simply saw earlier, was direct manufacturing labor for manufacturing overhead and total manufacturing cost for the G&A expense. And now we have two factors, two FCCM factors for each of those two pools. So let's now go and fill out and complete the spreadsheet and the FCCM tool. When you go through the module, you should have been able to download a FCCM tool. This tool has two tabs. The left tab is the instruction tab. Notice it goes through and discuss about FCCM, where it's from, where you can go to the reference guide to be able to see greater detail in terms of FCCM, and also how to complete the tool, which is the second tab. Notice it discusses what an allocation base, what the FCCM factors are, things of this nature. The second tab is the actual tool itself. So let's go through now and complete this tool. Notice we had in the problem direct manufacturing labor as the base for manufacturing overhead. There was a relationship between direct manufacturing labor and manufacturing overhead. So under manufacturing, we're going to put in the dollar amounts for direct manufacturing labor, the 276,750. Notice that's the same as we saw here under direct manufacturing labor, the 276,750. Next, we're going to put the FCCM factor, which is 0.02550. And the tool already has, you can see, the calculation set up there to determine the dollar amount from applying the FCCM factor to the allocation base. The next item, we have nothing for engineering, and we have no overhead pool for material. Now let's take a look at the G&A, general administrative expenses. Notice we have in the base, it said earlier that the base for G&A was total manufacturing cost, again, which is $1,069,550. Again, from our problem, it mentioned the base was total manufacturing cost, and total manufacturing cost was the $1,069,550. We then apply the FCCM factor, which is 0.00245. Again, we get a dollar amount of $2,260. Notice again that we have a formula in the tool that will do the calculation for you. When you add the $7,057 for the FCCM amount for manufacturing and the $2,620 for the amount for G&A, you get a total FCCM amount of $9,678. Of course, now we have to apply the Treasury rate, which was 6% given to us in the problem. You took this Treasury rate is divided into the total FCCM amount of $9,678 to get the facilities capital employed of $161,292. Now, we had earlier in the problem, if you've noticed, it mentioned that the application was 20% to land, 40% to buildings, and 40% to equipment. So going back to the tool, we're going to put in 20% for land and 40% for buildings. Notice that the equipment portion is already calculated for us. The total percentages for land, building, and equipment has to equal 100%. The tool already has a formula set up under the equipment, so you don't need to data enter anything on that field. That way, the facilities capital employed will always equal 100%. Notice that all it does was, in terms of the amount allocated to land and buildings, which we don't have FCCM for, but in this example, you have 20% times the 161 gives you $258, excuse me. Same logic under buildings. We took the 40% times the 161,292 for the facilities capital employed to get us the total amount of $64,517 for buildings. And the same logic, 40% applied to the 161,292 gives you the total dollar amount of $64,517. So that's how the FCCM amount is allocated between the three items, land, buildings, and equipment. This concludes our module for FCCM. And if you have any other interest or items concerning FCCM, please check the DAU website under Continuous Learning Modules for the Facilities Capital Cost of Money, or FCCM, to get better ideas of how to complete this tool. Thank you.